Hi, it's Dwyer. It's December 21st, 2024. GamblersAdvisory.com. Also, bettingangle.us. Let's talk about Alexander Usyk's successful victory in the rematch over Tyson Fury. But first, remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Folks, according to CompuBox, the only round in which Tyson Fury landed more punches than Alexander Usyk was the fourth round. Let me just say I was rooting for Fury in the fight. I got him at great odds. I thought that he was cruising in the first fight until he hit adversity. He lost the fight. In my opinion, you have to beat the champ to take his title. Right? It's a different dynamic scoring wise than it was when both guys had a share of the title. Here, Usyk was the winner in the first fight. Fury had to do more than have some kind of photo finish. And I'm not convinced that he got that. Right? The group that was right here online wasn't me. It's the group of you in the comment section who talked about how you saw Usyk winning this fight by a few rounds. In my eyes, while Fury had moments, right, in terms of power shots, Usyk only lands 6 more than him. Right? While Fury had moments, I would argue that Usyk wins the fight by at least a couple of rounds. I would argue that stamina really became an issue later in the fight. And Usyk was the person who looked like he had the fresher legs, looked like he had less wear and tear, and understand he was the older fighter. Let me also say, too, we talk about who's a great fighter and who's not. Ali didn't have anything close to Usyk's legs at 38 years old. Understand there's an age dynamic here to Usyk that needs to be admired, right? This is a guy who still has hand speed, who is still a great athlete, who still moves around the ring, who still has stamina in his late 30s. So let's talk about some themes that I saw, right? Betting-wise, it was a loss for me. The only consolation is that I cut my loss a little bit with an over, right? But let's talk about some themes here. I thought, particularly after watching an excellent interviewer, I believe his name is Ade. He's on the Zone. That interview should still be up. It's pre-fight. He's talking to Tyson Fury. And Fury is doing his best Bobby Knight impersonation, right? Fury sounds indignant. Fury sounds like he's going through the motions for the interview. Fury, is dropping some real stuff where he's talking about how in the past he's been suicidal, suffered from depression, how he did seriously think that he was walking away from the sport after the Dillian White fight, that he now realizes he's going to have a very hard time walking away from the sport at any time, right? The interview was an eye-opener, in part because the interviewer was magnificent, asking the right questions. But understand, when they were talking about this fight, presumably the reason for the interview, Fury was a bit too flippant, a bit too dismissive, right? Fury's point was simply, I've had real trials and tribulations in my life. This is just boxing. This fight, I could be fighting anyone. They asked Fury, why did you move your training camp to a new location? And Fury said, well, just spur of the moment. I don't really care, he said, where I have my training camp, which sounded profoundly bogus to me. Right? Profoundly bogus. He said, my training camp could be in Las Vegas. I wouldn't care. I'm just doing my job. He made his vocation sound like a job, not a calling. But one thing was clear in that interview. At the end of the interview, Fury ad-libbed and said, look, I'm going to, beat this guy up. And you got the feeling that he was ornery. He was upset. He was going to take it out on his opponent. He was hinting at a front foot performance. Folks, that was all a head fake. Right? This fight opens up and Fury's he's on his back foot. Folks, there was way too much back foot for me here. He's on his back foot against a guy who is a better athlete. Right now, Fury, I thought, won the first round. I thought Fury won the third round. I thought Fury got off to a fast start. But understand, as you're watching it, you're wondering, okay, when Usyk, who's a master at adjustments, changes the pace of this fight, you were wondering if Fury could keep up with the pace of the fight. You thought, okay, is Fury going to show me that he weighed conservatively 40 pounds more than Usyk if you believe his clothes weighed 10 or more pounds at the weigh-in? Right? But it's clear this is a fight between two guys of different sizes. You thought there would be a moment in this fight where Fury understood that officially he lost the first fight and that he would have to show us a dynamic. He would have to hurt the champ. He would have to back up Usyk in order for us to ask the question, has he taken Usyk's title? Right? He had to stagger Usyk. He had to show us that he was the man. Certainly, he wasn't going to try to win this fight on just technical brilliance. You thought there has to be a lot of front foot someplace. There has to be a lot of, I'm the bigger guy, someplace. Folks, those spots were extremely few and far between. Right? Fury, back foot, it's a bad visual. Because at times, in fact for whole rounds, Usyk's on his front foot. Right? You have the smaller man looking more coordinated, feinting more, throwing more punches, creating the tempo of the fight, and being on his front foot against Tyson Fury, who's on his back foot, and it was unclear what he was trying to do. Let me say, too, he has his right hand up by the side of his face. Great move, right? Because Usyk's big punch is a straight left, right? Which would line up with the defense that Fury had up by the right side of his head. The problem is, if you're going to fight out of a right-handed stance, you need to throw that right hand with authority sometimes, don't you? Don't you need to have the timing of the fight set up where if Usyk is out of position to throw a straight left, you go for the home run, right? He's the smaller man. You try to knock him down. You try to knock him out. Usyk comes in, even with clothes, weighing less than 230. Folks, I don't have the sheet in front of me, but I believe the weight limit for Bridgerweight's 224. In other words, Alexander Usyk for this fight is barely a heavyweight. You thought Fury has to throw some power punches. Since his right hand is his big punch, certainly he has to throw it at some time. That right hand is a bit two-part. And understand, I talked about that right hand in the pre-fight video. I talked about how I thought, the video I made earlier today, I talked about how I thought he needed to have that hand parked. But this was excessive parking by my standards. There wasn't the threat in this fight that Fury was gonna unload with power shots. It just didn't happen. So understand, Daniel Dubois famously dropped Alexander Usyk. The shot may have been low. I don't think it was. Right? But there's a feeling that Usyk's a guy who doesn't take body shots that well. Later in the Dubois fight, after Usyk gets off the canvas, Dubois lands some legal body shots. And Usyk turns to the referee and complains. Right? Usyk's midsection must have been sore to the point where he couldn't tell whether the punches were on the belt or above the belt. Right? So you thought there were going to be some hard body shots in this fight. You thought Tyson Fury was going to be the one throwing some hard body shots in this fight. He does throw some. Folks, Usyk at least matches him with the body shots. Was that the impression you got? That's the impression I got. You had the shorter guy, the more active guy, on his front foot going to the bigger man's body. Folks, how can I, in a fight like that, think that the bigger man, who doesn't stagger the smaller man appreciably, took the smaller man's title? It doesn't work. I know Frank Warren's upset. Warren needs to take his fighter aside and say, hey man, how did the little guy get close enough to you to throw all those jabs to your body? Right? I mean, Warren needs to look at the film and count the body shots. Right, folks? Usyk is feasting on Fury's body at times. You know, there are times in this fight where you were hoping Fury would feast on Usyk's body as much as Usyk's feasting on his body. Let me just say, too, again, what I mentioned earlier. In a fight between a champion and a challenger, if you're watching the fight and the champ's doing as much as the challenger, well, the champ should leave the ring with his belt. Let me also say, too, that Fury does try to get a little bit rough and tumble. He starts clinching Usyk. Right? He even roughs up Usyk illegally, right? During the clinch, he's hitting Usyk on the back of the head on some of these clinches. Right now, folks, you know, boxing is the hurt business, as Ray Robinson called it. Right? It's the hurt business. I'm not expecting professional prize fighters to not seek advantages. Right? But let's just say here, again, it's a bad visual. You're watching a fight where the smaller guy is outmaneuvering the bigger guy. The smaller guy, because of feints, Usyk moves his hands to and stuff like that. The smaller guy's the one setting the tempo. Then you see the bigger guy, he lands one or two shots, then he grabs the smaller guy. The fact that Fury then felt a need to hit Usyk in the back of the head looked cheap to me. It looked desperate to me. Particularly when the context is that Fury lost the first fight. Right? You thought, wow, this is his big idea of getting into this fight? I don't mind rough clinches. I love guys who know how to lean on you. Big men who know how to throw their weight around. But here, it didn't work. Let me say this too. Here's Usyk. He's active. He's moving around the ring. Understand what a high-risk situation that is. Right? There's a cushion between the guys most of the time. Right? You know, if Usyk, because of all the movement, got hit hard and was dazed and confused, and it impacted his movement, we would all notice it. Because Usyk's movement's a big part of his game. Folks, in this fight, nothing impacted Usyk's movement. Right? There's not a moment in this fight where I thought Usyk looked like he was remotely in trouble, that he was staggered anywhere. Right? And this was in a rematch where Fury had to convince us that he had taken Usyk's title. I didn't see Usyk with big time cuts. There's not a round where I thought to myself, wow, is Usyk going to make it to the bell? There's not a round where I thought to myself, hey, this is Fury's opportunity to really hurt this guy. That moment never came in this fight. Let me say, too, that if you are the bigger man and you outweigh the smaller man by 40 or more pounds, you want a shootout. In a fight like this, where you're in the 7th, 8th rounds, and you're thinking, wow, this fight's too close. Right? This fight either looks like a jump ball or looks like Usyk has the advantage. Right? When we're in a fight like that, I want to see the big man say, okay, well, it's come to this. I need to make this a shootout. Right? We saw a fight earlier this year. Boachuk against Virgil Ortiz. Now, I think Boachuk won that fight. But at least Ortiz, in the last 2 rounds of that fight, tried to go for it. Right? Understood. I need to make a point here. Right? Here, Tyson Fury doesn't make it a shootout. Right? You wanted a 5, 6, 7 punch exchange. Right? Where Fury's throwing the, 6 or 7 punches. You wanted Fury to take some of the shots or dare Usyk to hit him with hard shots to stop him. Now, maybe I have this wrong. Right? Usyk is a decent puncher. He's not a great puncher. I don't get the feeling he hits like Anthony Joshua. Right? I don't get that feeling at all. So I don't understand the hesitancy, particularly when the fight at a minimum hangs in the balance. Right? Fury himself had to know in the 7th and 8th rounds, I need to do something big here. Right? I don't understand the fear of Usyk's straight left. Right? I know it caught up with Daniel Dubois, but the bottom line is Joshua goes the distance twice. Fury has already gone the distance by the time the 7th and 8th rounds roll around. If you're Tyson Fury at that point, he couldn't have thought, I'm comfortably in the lead. Right? He couldn't have thought that. He had to think, wow, this fight is close, and we're heading into the last third of the fight, and I'm fighting a guy with great stamina. So you thought there would be that line in the sand moment, right, where big shots are thrown. Right? The idea is, okay, we're at the part of the fight where, whether I have the ability or not, I need to go for broke and land some big shots. So here's my big right, here's my left hook. You go ahead and go for broke on your shots. Let's have that line in the sand exchange. Folks, there's no urgency. This is the biggest damning statement I can say about this fight. There's no urgency in the later rounds by Tyson Fury, where it's a complete line in the sand. Look, I know the 12th round's explosive, right? That's a little bit too late, isn't it? I just thought that Fury would come out much more animated. I had heard that he hadn't seen his wife for weeks. Right? You thought, oh, wow, this guy, different camp location, hasn't seen his wife, is ornery in interviews. You thought this guy was going to come out and act like, someone stole his lunch. That he was hungry and he was, going to get the lunch back. Even if it took some rough and tumble risk-taking. Right, folks? You didn't get that here. What you got was a champion defending his title. Right? So, of course, now, according to the rumors, Tyson Fury is going to fight AJ. Right, folks? Just understand, that's a fight featuring two guys who've lost twice to Alexander Usyk. Now, Usyk's curious because even though Dubois jumps in the ring and wants his revenge, just understand, and that would be a payday, he's talking about going back down to cruiserweight. But cruiserweight would require him to lose something like 26 pounds at 38 years old. He could easily make Bridger weight. Right? But Bridger weight, let's just say I'm not sure if the payday travels with him to Bridger weight. Let me say this too, and it's interesting. Cruiserweight, of course, is loaded right now. Right? You have J.O. Pataya. You have Gilberto Ramirez, right? I believe Ramirez is already a Hall of Famer. I think Obitaya needs to win one or two more big fights. Obitaya, of course, beat Maris Briedis twice. Let me just say, Maris Briedis remains one of the absolute toughest fights Alexander Usyk ever had. Right? The heavyweights did nothing to show us that they were tougher competition than Maris Briedis was for Usyk at cruiserweight. Folks, that's a close fight. That's a close fight. And Briedis doesn't, get the count that Tyson Fury got in the first fight. Right? Briedis doesn't get roughed up in the last round like Anthony Joshua gets roughed up in that first Usyk fight. Right? And so understand, Usyk, I believe, sees what we all see. This is a deep heavyweight division. I believe he understands it's just a matter of time before his former sparring partner, Martin Bakole, gets a mandatory designation, and Usyk might not want to fight him in a real fight. Let me say, too, that you have other scary guys. They are scary. They would give him a hard time at heavyweight. Zhilei Zhang is a southpaw. Right? It's easier for a southpaw to hold their lead hand up on the right side of their face to guard against Usyk's straight left than it is for a righty. Right? Zhilei Zhang would still have his power hand. Let me just say, and I know the public disagrees with me, and that's good. More beer for me, hopefully, if the fights happen. I think Filip Hrgovic would be a tough fight for Usyk. So given that Usyk has really conquered the UK, by the way, in the UK, Fabio Wardley, because he's unstructured, because he'd be coming in with hard shots, both hands, crashing the pocket, he'd be an interesting fight for an Usyk. Usyk would be feinting and stuff. Wardley wouldn't care about the feints because he's not reading them anyway. Right? But just understand, you have one guy, he beat Joshua twice, he's already beaten Dubois, now he's beaten Tyson Fury twice. So if Usyk wants to leave the stage, especially since he could easily fight at Bridgerweight, also, he's been perfect. Why risk perfection? Gold medal. Undisputed at cruiser. Undisputed at heavy. We can't say he's dodged people at heavyweight. When, in addition to beating an Olympic gold medalist and a guy who was the lineal, he's even beaten the guy who got the belt that he got stripped of. Right, so if Usyk was thinking about leaving the heavyweight division, now is the time. There might be money on the table if, and I use the word if If Daniel Dubois beats Joseph Parker, Usyk probably beats Dubois again. Right? Let's be real. Parker's a tougher match, in my opinion, one man's opinion. Parker's a tougher match for Usyk. If I'm Usyk, I have to weigh the risk reward. Are people going to say that I'm avoiding Parker if I leave the division now, before Parker has a title? Right, so Usyk has some decisions to make. Let me also say, too, and again, I've mentioned this many times, right, I was born in Kingston, Jamaica. Right, I was raised in a third world family. Right, we would watch the Olympics and we'd be rooting hard for the Jamaican in the race. And if that Jamaican just qualified for the finals, people were hugging in my living room. Right now, Alexander Usyk is a Ukrainian icon. At this point, he's one of the best fighters who ever lived. You can imagine he has the resume. He does not need to fight another round to be viewed as a huge hero in the Ukraine. Right? Understand, Vladimir Klitschko won't fight him because he's a countryman. Right? I imagine the Ukraine's a lot like Jamaica. Right? You know, it's all about country. Right? So if you are Alexander Usyk, do you stick around to fight a Joe Parker? Do you stick around to have a real fight with Martin Bakole? Or Zhili Zhang? Or any of the others? Is that worth, and Crawford has to think about this too, is that worth risking the years it has taken you to have this impressive and unbeaten record? Aren't you the gold standard right now, at least one of them, for your home country? Isn't that worth, literally, decades of star treatment? Right? You're not competing with Pat Mahomes in the Ukraine. Right? You're not competing with LeBron James in the Ukraine. You're the show. You walk in the building, everyone stands up. Let's just say he has some things to think about. If he does go to cruiser, he has an excellent opportunity at brand extension. Right? If he feels he could beat J.O. Pataya, that fight could take place in Australia. If he feels he could beat Gilberto Ramirez, that fight would take place in Mexico City or someplace in Mexico. Understand, look at the body shots that Gilberto Ramirez landed on Dmitry Bivol, right? He was a bigger threat to Bivol's body, quite frankly, than was Arthur Beterbiev. Just food for thought. In other words, if Usyk goes to cruiser, cruisers already gave him some of his toughest moments, right? I can't say, that Maris Breedis fight had very tough rounds, right? I can't say at heavyweight Usyk looked out of his depth, right? So we shouldn't assume that because Usyk has been an undisputed heavyweight champion that automatically means he can drop back down 2 weight classes to cruiser and dominate there. That's not how it works. Right? That's not how it works at all. You try to lose weight when you're older, you pay a price. Also, young guys don't remember your heyday. Right? They remember their careers. You're an old timer if you predate their career. So those are my thoughts. Let me hear yours. I was wrong on this fight. This was not the fight I was expecting. I was expecting some front foot hostility from Tyson Fury. I was expecting a different attitude. Not a, hey, I'm technically great. I'm going to shoot a jab. I'm going to use the jab as a crutch to keep you away from me. Right? I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting a George Foreman type setup where the guy covers up, comes in and says, hey, let's have at it. right? I'm doing the math in my head. I'm 6'4", I weigh more than you, I hit harder than you, you're faster than me. I'm going to cut off the ring on you. I'm going to treat you like I treated Joe Frazier. I'm prepared to hit the canvas multiple times, which Foreman did against Ron Lyle. Right? Let's have a shootout. As long as I'm the last man standing, I'm good. I thought Tyson Fury was going to come in with that attitude. We'll call it a Derek Chisora attitude, because that's the attitude Chisora had against Usyk. That's not the attitude that Tyson Fury had here. We heard about the great camp. We heard he was cut before. He's ornery in the pre-fight interview with the Zone, right? He's, basically saying, hey, I'm really going to rough this guy up. What he meant was he was going to try to rough up Usyk with his jab. Right? By the way, for those keeping track here, Usyk lands 179 punches. This is CompuBox. Fury lands 144. So he's outlanded by 35 punches. Here's the kicker. Fury lands 28.3% of his shots. Usyk, in a fight where he throws 35 more punches, lands 35 more punches. Usyk connects at a 42.3% rate. 42.3% rate. Jabs to the body. Fury, against the guy who was dropped off a body shot by Daniel Dubois, lands 8 jabs. 8 to Usyk's body. Usyk, by contrast, lands 32 jabs to Fury's body. So, Fury does land some power punches. But when you add up the power punches, Usyk lands 46 power punches to Fury's body. Fury lands 37 power punches. In other words, Fury comes in on his back foot and is even outlanded to the body by Alexander Usyk. You add this up, and whether it's a 2-round margin, whether it's a 4-round margin, let's just say it's a margin in favor of the champion. Right? Clearly Tyson Fury, at least according to CompuBox, at least according to these old two eyes, did not do enough to take the title. Right? And this is from someone who bet on him. Those are my thoughts. Let me hear yours in the comment section of this YouTube video. Also, don't limit yourself to my observations. If you have other independent observations, please raise them for all of us here in this forum. Thanks for stopping by.